The history of Georgia marble's industry is much more complicated than the complicated tale that meets the eye. It begins with the construction of the old federal road through Cherokee land. This led to the removal of the tribes of Native Americans from this area. Bill Cagle's unique connection to the area and the marble history that has formed in our immediate area makes him an expert in all things Georgia marble. If you have not been to the Marble Festival on the first weekend in October, you've got to go and you've got to take one of Bill's tours. You jump on a school bus. I think it's $20 a head. You jump on a school bus and they ride you around the marble area, and you will see 3 to 4 marble quarries that are in business. And you will learn everything there is to learn. And today, you're going to hopefully purchase one of his books. $20 cash, Confederate money.
Credit card.
Okay,
Money,
Confederate money, and
Monopoly money.
yeah, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, give it up a warm Bentry welcome to Bill Cagle.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew invited me back early, I guess, late winter, and asked me to come talk to you, and I said, sure, I'd love to do so. And I see a few familiar faces, some old friends from almost 50 years now, and relatives. Thank you, Rebecca, for coming out. And I can't believe your girls are that old to be able to go off to all different parts of the country. My wife used to teach them piano lessons when they were, But anyhow, thanks again for having me. Learned a lot about the wonderful work y'all's group is doing, and I guess we've got the DOT to thank for all these invasive plants like kudzu, which is if I see a kudzu sprig popping up anywhere on my property, I'm doing a double concentrate bath of Roundup with it, because I was like, no, and no. So, but anyhow, well, thanks again for giving up your Saturday morning to come out and talk, hear me talk a little bit about the marble industry and the unique history of Pickens County. 200 years ago, Pickens County what is now Pickens County was pretty much the dead center of the Cherokee Nation in Georgia. And a lot of people is not familiar with all the history that was here and what history transpired here since the birth of our nation. So I always get a lot of questions and comments on my quarry tours, which I've been doing for close to 20 years now, for the Marble Festival. There's wow, I had no idea that this history was here. There's so much history here. And people say, well, where can I get some information on this? Well, there's some books that are out there that are no longer in publication. You might be able to find them on eBay or Amazon, so forth and so on. And I said, but they're going to be hard to find. And people say, well, you need to write a book. So back during I guess for me anyhow, one of the good things that came out from the COVID shutdown for about 6 weeks, it allowed me to complete my book, and it came out in August of 2021. So, and if somebody would have said 10 years ago that Bill Cagle, you will be a published author, I said, you've been smoking something and you need to share it with the rest of us, because I'd like to be that delusional. So, but anyhow, without any further ado, again, thank you for coming out. And I do have a few books to sell if you're interested. At the end of the presentation, I'll take questions and comments also. And if you have a question during the presentation, please raise your hand. The early days of the marble industry, well, the marble was first used by the Creeks and the Cherokees back in the 1400s. There's been marble effigies, projectiles that have been carbon dated, showing the use going back to at least the 1400s. 200 years ago, the Cherokee Nation was divided up into two parts. You had the upper town chiefs and the lower town chiefs. And the upper town chiefs was the head was James Van. You've heard Chief James Van up in Chatsworth. And the lower town chiefs was led by Chief Doublehead. And the lower town chiefs were more opposed to making deals with the federal government for far as a road to come in to North Georgia. And the Chief Doublehead argued that the reason he was opposed to it, he thought it would bring too much development, too much violence, and so forth and so on. Until the one thing that, and again, I'm not going down the weeds here, but one of the things in my research that kind of shocked and surprised me, but then again it didn't, was that the Cherokees, you know, they're flesh and blood like us. They were human beings. And their leaders were just as corruptible as what we have in leadership since 1776. They could be bribed. And, you know, the Trail of Tears, as bad as it was, it wouldn't have been as bad if their leaders would have done the right things in the very beginning. Probably not as many would have perished. And they were looking out for their own self-interest versus the interests of their people. So that's all I'll say about that. Again, because that's a whole new separate presentation there. But anyhow, Chief Doublehead was murdered in 1805 by James Van and George Saunders, and he and his brothers, I think his name was John Saunders. They lived in what is now Talking Rock. They were half Cherokees, and they murdered Chief Doublehead because he changed his opinion and supported the federal road. He received these gifts and bribes and so forth. The federal road started out as a Cherokee trading path. There was from Danville, Kentucky, all the way down to St. Augustine, Florida. So the federal government, because they knew that growth was coming in to North Georgia and that eastern Tennessee and southern Kentucky, and they wanted a better trading path to set up trade or to allow trade that for all the trading posts and be able to develop North Georgia. The Cherokees agreed in 1805. They signed the Treaty of Tellico with the federal government, and the Cherokees were paid $500 for the rights to come through the Cherokee Nation for the federal government to do so and build a road. The Cherokees in return also were able to set up taverns, inns, and they charged a toll in various areas of the federal road. For instance, if you wanted to cross the river or whatever, if you were a cattle driver or driving your hogs, cattle, whatever, you paid a toll for every animal that you were driving. If you were on foot, horseback, buggy, stagecoach, whatever, the toll would change depending on your mode of transportation. And it made passages, like I said, from Danville, Kentucky to Augusta, and the taverns were established every 20 to 30 miles. Because you got to remember, 200 years ago, by foot, by horse and buggy, 20 miles, 30 miles, that was an all-day journey. It wasn't as easy it wasn't as convenient as we have here to hop in the car and 15 minutes later you're 30 miles down the road. And so these taverns, and I gave a presentation. I'm also president of our historical society. Have any of y'all ever been to our history presentations we have? I gave a presentation back in end of April on the history of the taverns is what is in now Pickens County, and the importance they played and just some more of the local history. But anyhow, these taverns were established every 20 to 30 miles. There was two down in Tate. You had the James Daniel Tavern, and where the Tate House is, you had the Harnage Inn and Tavern. And then you had one north of town. These were the main taverns. You had one north of town, the Simmons Nelson Trip House. And that house, unfortunately, about 25 years ago was torn down due to it was beyond repair. Also, missionary stations were throughout the territory and throughout the Cherokee Nation. And we had Carmel Station in Saundersville, which is now Talking Rock. And again, those were mostly led by the Moravians, and they were to bring Christianity to the Cherokee Nation. But probably the biggest thing that led to development for North Georgia was in 1829, just about 35, 40 miles from here, we had the first nation's first major gold rush. It wasn't the first gold rush, but it was the first major gold rush in Dahlonega, White County, and Habersham County. And it also provided a passage for the Trail of Tears, and it operated in full through the 1840s and partial through the Civil War. Both Union and Federal troops used the Federal Road to move about during the war, and parts of it was still in use into the early 1900s. And Pickens County today has the largest segment that is pretty much the continual use of roads that are still used today. That was the Federal Road. The Cherokee people, they were very advanced people. Sequoyah, I'm sure most of y'all heard of Sequoyah. He invented the Cherokee alphabet. They had their own newspapers. They acquired many customs of white settlers, farming techniques. And again, the Cherokees did not live in teepees like you see on Hollywood and out west and what have you. They lived in cabins and houses and so forth. Have y'all been to the old jail in town? Okay, the little cabin next door, that was built by Charles Solly Dunbean, and it was located originally on Highway 5 South, just south of town. And Charles Solly Dunbean was a Cherokee, and he built that, had a little store, and he also had a small inn there on the Federal Road. But he wasn't a very successful businessman, and then he had to vacate for 1838 for the Trail of Tears as well. The Cherokee Nation in 1825 had 13,563 people. There were 73 white women and white men that intermarried into the Cherokees, and they owned 1,277 slaves. They adopted the Christian religion, built churches, passed laws against liquor consumption. They were their own self-governed nation. They were their own nation. Whoops, excuse me. And legend has it, they settled their differences by horse racing and playing a form of baseball, hence the name Ball Ground, where the name Ball Ground came from. Legend has it. But I'm not going to let the facts stand in the way of a good story. Y'all heard this term, there's gold in them dar hills? Well, that came from the gold being discovered in the hills of North Georgia. In 1828 to 1830 was when we experienced the most growth in North Georgia. Over 10,000 settlers moved into North Georgia between 1829 and 1832. So just imagine, now again, you remember 200 years ago, this was just woods, very sparsely populated. I mean, even today, if we had 10,000 people move into North Georgia today, we would see the growth. Could you imagine what it was like 200 years ago? How much growth they experienced. And the miners became known as 29ers until 1849, when gold was discovered in California. During that, from 1828 to 1829 to 1832, there was over $500,000 of gold produced or discovered in North Georgia, which would be well over $15 million. So it'd probably be closer to $17, $18 million today, because gold is what, $3,400 an ounce now. So Henry Fitzsimmons. Have y'all ever heard of Henry Fitzsimmons? Oh, yeah. Henry Fitzsimmons is credited for discovering the marble industry in Pickens County, back then Cherokee County. He was born somewhere between 1790 and 1795. He immigrated. He was a stowaway on a ship in 1819 when he was 24, somewhere around the age of 24, from Ireland. Settled here in Georgia. He married Miss Almira Burke, and they lived in Clark County for 4 years, from 1822 to 26. And he was a member of a militia. He was also a stonemason by trade. In 1832, now there was I forgot his name now, I've got it at home, a gentleman, I don't know if he still lives here, this has been several years ago. He was a descendant of Henry Fitzsimmons that lived here in Bent Tree. And legend, I'd always been told that he was on his way to Tennessee to build a dam. That's the reason he was traveling the federal road. And this gentleman told me that that was not so, that he won in 1832, he land lot 172 in the 21st district in the land lottery. So he was coming from Lawrenceville, where he lived, and he helped build the first jail in Lawrenceville. He was coming to inspect his winnings in Pickens County in 1832. And as legend has it, being the good Irishman that he was, and I can say this because I've got a little Irish blood in me, they stopped at a tavern on the inn and tavern on the way in to Pickens County, or what is now Pickens County. And I know it's hard to believe that an Irishman would do this, but he consumed a little bit too much white lightning, became a little bit rambunctious. I know that an Irishman doing that would just... But anyhow, he got kicked off the stagecoach down around what's now Marble Hill. And I guess after he sobered up a little bit, being a stonemason, he stumbled across an outcropping of marble and said, hey, this is a good quality grade of marble. And so he moved his family here the next year, and started in 1836. He began buying up more property, and he opened up the Long Swamp Marble Company, built small finishing mills, and had 2 small quarries in what's now Marble Hill. Back then, that was known as the Long Swamp Valley. In 1840, he erected a monument in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which was the first public use of Georgia marble. And that monument is still being used today. It's in the square. And it was to commemorate fallen soldiers who died in battle with the Creek Indians. And again, like I say, this was the first public use of Georgia marble. And Henry Fitzsimmons, on Christmas Eve in 1845, was in a tavern and got into an altercation with a gentleman and was in a knife fight and was murdered. They never captured the assailant, but the same Bent Tree resident years ago told me that he was murdered by a man named John Mundy. And can anybody want to guess why they were arguing? Well, who said woman? Okay. John Mundy was having an affair with Almira. And they got into a knife fight on Christmas Eve, and he was murdered. John Mundy was never accused, or I guess formally accused or arrested or whatever. And the interesting thing was I think the following July of 1846, Almira gave birth to a daughter. Now, was it Henry's or was it Mr. Mundy's? Who knows? Harnagesville, Georgia, was named after Ambrose Harnage, who owned the Harnage Inn and Tavern. He and his wife, Nanny, they called her Nanny. Her name was Nancy Sanders. She was half Cherokee, and they ran the Harnage Inn and Tavern, which stood where the Tate House currently stands today. It was the site of the first court in Cherokee County. It was a political gathering place. The first court was held there. The first county officers were elected at Harnagesville, or at the Harnage Inn and Tavern. And we had General Andrew Jackson in 1819 was traveling the federal road to go fight the Seminoles down in Florida, stayed at the Harnage Inn and Tavern. President James Monroe stayed at the Harnage Inn and Tavern. So it was a fairly popular place for people to gather. And Samuel Tate acquired land lot 147 from Dr. Jesse Green in 1834. Jesse Green acquired it from his brother William Green, who acquired it from Mr. Fawn, Mr. Fawn's out of Savannah, who won in the land lottery. And in 1880, Harnesville was renamed to Tate. Samuel Tate was Colonel Sam Tate's grandfather, and when he tore down, or the Harnage Inn and Tavern caught fire, burnt down, and built the Tate homestead there on that site as well. Samuel Tate was the first Tate family member to be formally involved in the marble industry here in Pickens County. In 1845, he leased out part of his land there where Georgia Marble currently is, behind the Tate House, or there along Long Swamp Creek as you cross the bridge. He, James Farrell, James Holmes, and Gideon Roberts built a small mill there. They were from Alabama, and he charged a royalty for all the marble that was finished and sold. Colonel Sam, that is. And Samuel Tate, Colonel Sam's grandfather, began buying up all the marble land in the Long Swamp Valley. He bought well over 20,000 acres of land in the Long Swamp Valley, which goes from essentially, say, Yellow Creek Road all the way down to Nelson, Georgia. And he prophesied, or William asked his dad, why are you buying all this land? And he said, well, son, he said, marble may not make you and your brother rich, but it'll surely make your kids rich. What a prophecy, as you'll see here shortly. In 1850, Samuel Tate was a partner at Tate Atkinson Company and is succeeded by Rankin, Sumney, and Hurlick in 1857, and it remained that until 1884 when Georgia Marble was founded. Henry Fitzsimmons also started a marble quarry down here at Cove Road along the S-curves. That was one of the first active quarries here in Pickens County 200 years ago, or almost 200 years ago. And then that became the Perseverance Quarry, and then it was finally closed down back in the 1980s when Blue Circle owned Georgia Marble. It was an aggregate quarry.
Bill,
Yes.
where was that?
Down here at the S-curves. That was a marble. That was a marble quarry. Like I say, until it was about 87, 88 when I think they shut that down. So, other marble companies in the area was Piedmont Marble, the Southern Marble Company, which is where Calcium Products is, Blue Ridge Marble, Sickles Manufacturing, Atlanta Marble Company, North Georgia Marble and Mining, Jasper Monumental Works, and Atlas Marble Company, which was down in Ball Ground. It was a finishing company in Ball Ground. The Georgia Marble Company was chartered in May 1st, 1884 by Yankee investors O.F. Bain, Henry Clement, Frank Siddell, and Harry Dewar. In 1882 to 1883, Stephen Tate, Colonel Sam's dad, was instrumental in bringing the railroad into Tate, then to Jasper. He worked with the state legislature, or the county. He worked with the county, who worked with the state legislature to secure a $100,000 bond to bring the railroad into Pickens County. The company arranged a 25-year mineral lease with 5,000 acres from the Tate family. In 1888, William and Stephen Tate, they were the first Tate family members to own Georgia Marble Company stock. 1890, the company purchased additional equipment, hired more workers through the sale of bonds, stocks, and notes. And in 1900, the company made a profit of about $12,000. The board of directors were more instrumental in taking money out of the company than reinvesting it. And a motion was made to sell the company, but it took about 10 years to do so. Yes, sir.
Back to the original past slide, there were 20,000 acres leased.
5,000.
5,000. How big is the marble footprint here? Is it 100,000 acres?
The question is, how large is the marble vein here in Pickens County? That's a very good question. It's hard to say, but they know it's over 7 miles in length, about a mile and a half or a half mile wide. And geologists, let's say 120, 30 years ago, they stopped drilling at a half mile deep. So really there's over 2,000 years with today's consumption of marble. So we don't have to worry about running out of marble anytime soon. Neither do our great grandkids have to worry about running out of marble. So the Tate family, 1895 to 1905, the Georgia Marble Company had a company store in the downtown Tate, the village of Tate. And it was managed by, every 10 years they would put the contract to who was going to manage the store up for bid. And from 1895 to 1905, the Stephen C. Tate estate held the contract, which meant Colonel Sam Tate was the manager. In 1905, William Tate's estate, Stephen's brother, won the right to manage the store. This put Colonel Sam out of a job. And he was approached by Henry Clement, who was the president of Georgia Marble. He knew that Colonel Sam had good business sense and felt that he would be a good candidate to take over leadership and ownership of the Georgia Marble Company. And with the help of Mr. R.T. Jones from Canton, Georgia, I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard that name. He was big in the cotton mills, the Bank of Canton. Pardon?
The library, R.T. Jones Library.
Yes, but also any golfers here? Bobby Jones's grandfather. Well, anyhow, with the help of family and friends and R.T. Jones, he required 6,791 shares of Georgia Marble stock. Colonel Sam era lasted from 1905 till his passing in October 1938. And just try to hurry through here a lot of this. The first year of ownership, he did not make any business decisions. He wanted to learn the marble industry from his managers, and he didn't want to be a laughing stock and look foolish in front of his men. So that's the reason he learned the business. But that first year, they made a record profit of $59,000. The next year, 1906, that's when Colonel Sam took over and started managing the business. They made a profit of $120,000, which was big money back then. End of 1917, Colonel Sam owned over 13,000 shares of the 20,000 shares of stock. He bought the competing marble companies, all in the Long Swamp Valley, through $1.5 million in bonds, and they had 9 quarries, 5 finishing mills, and in 1924, the record profit was almost $500,000. Colonel Sam he ruled with an iron fist. He was very authoritative, but he was also very charitable. He was a very complex individual. In his younger days, he was quite the playboy, party animal, womanizer. He drank a quart of moonshine a day, smoked big cigars. And one reason why I know he drank so much moonshine, my great-grandfather and his brothers had the first legal distillery in Pickens County, and Colonel Sam was one of their best customers. But what changed him, he'd been on a 2-week binge, probably in the late 1890s, somewhere around there, and he was very close to his mother, and she passed away. They had no idea where he was, how to get in touch with him. And when he came back, he found out that his mother was buried, and he was very close to her. And so he was determined that he was going to stop drinking and carousing. It took him about 2 years to clean himself up, but then he took that passion from being a party animal to business, and he ruled with an iron fist. You couldn't gamble. You couldn't drink Coca-Cola. You couldn't chew tobacco on Sundays. My aunt, who passed away a few years ago, she remembers that, the men who worked at Georgia Marble, if they wanted to chew tobacco on Sundays, they'd have to catch the train and come to Jasper. Because if you were caught, you were probably going to lose your job, be severely disciplined. And if you lost your job, then you lost your house, you lost your health care your doctor's care because he had one of the first managed health care systems in the country. If you're a worker, you paid 50 cents a month, and your family received medical care from one of the doctors. There was a doctor in Nelson and also one in Tate. He was a devout Methodist, and like I say, he didn't allow his workers to drink Coca-Cola because until he became friends with Asa Candler and Robert Woodruff. So.
What's wrong with Coca-Cola?
Well, so at the company store, they used to sell it. So they had a fountain there. And this is what a descendant told me of Colonel Sam, was that the bowl that they used to catch the drippings from the fountain, it would eat the marble. And he said, well, that can't be good for you. So if it's eating marble, I mean, what's it doing to your insides? But then, when he built Tate Mountain Estates, all his rich Atlanta,
Does it still eat marble?
I don't know. I haven't had a soft drink in years, so I couldn't tell you. So when he built Tate Mountain Estates, his rich Atlanta friends would come up here. They'd stop at the company store, and they couldn't buy Coca-Cola. They couldn't buy chewing tobacco. They couldn't buy cigarettes, cigars, whatever. And they didn't like that. And so, then Colonel Sam, he started allowing this, sale of Coca-Cola and tobacco products there, so his rich Atlanta friends could stop when they came up to Tate Mountain Estates. And he was also a devout Methodist, and he encouraged his workers to go to the Methodist church, Tate Methodist Church. My aunt, when they moved here from Putnam County, her dad was an accountant, and her godfather ran the company store back in this is the late 1930s, before Colonel Sam died. And Mr. Athan interviewed for a job as an accountant. Colonel Sam was wanting to hire an accountant. And he told him, said, he offered him the job. He said, but you'll live in this house, you'll attend the Methodist church, you'll do this, you'll do that, and what have you. And Mr. Athan said, well, Mr. Tate, he said, I appreciate the job offer, but he said, I try to live my life accordingly to what I think God would like for how he would have me live. And he said, I only serve one God, and it's not you. And so he turned down Colonel Sam, made him somatic and chew nails. Then he went to work for Lawson Chevrolet here on Main Street, where the old mule house is. The company had a championship semi-pro baseball team. Colonel Sam would go out and recruit baseball players from different colleges and offer them a job at Georgia Marble to come play, mainly just to come play baseball. And they had several years of championship baseball team for the semi-pro leagues. They'll travel all over the different mill towns. Built schools and churches. He built, obviously, Tate School, the Tate Methodist Church. He built the Mount Calvary Church for the black employees in Smoky Hollow, going towards Nelson. He donated marble to every Methodist college in Georgia. And he provided the company store there. And my aunt told me, said they had the finest meat counter, and you could buy anything you wanted to there at the company store. He was also DOT commissioner for about 18 months until his health started to decline in a little bit before the Depression, in the late 1920s, when he resigned as DOT commissioner. And he began investing in equipment and modernizing the plant. He built the Tate House in 1926 for about $450,000. And again, I mentioned to you about the first managed health system. For those of you that haven't read my book, anybody want to take a guess what Collier's National estimate his net worth to be?
5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. All right.
And that's $1924. Today, that's probably about 2.9 trillion. You hear about the Carnegies, the Mellons, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers. They were wealthy, but not as wealthy as Colonel Sam, at least on paper. Now, again, most of that was underground. You had mineral rights. But still, could you imagine being worth almost $3 trillion today? I mean, that's mind-boggling. The Depression years were difficult years for the company. He sold jobs at or below cost or donated money just to keep his workers busy. Again, he ruled with an iron fist, but he was also very charitable. During the Depression, no workers ever lost their job, which meant they didn't lose their housing. Kids still went to school. He was very pro-education. He recruited the best teachers around. Tate Elementary had one of the first motion picture projectors. They had championship debate teams, glee clubs, athletics. I mean, the best of everything was at Tate Elementary School. And Colonel Sam, he managed and operated the Georgia Marble Company until October of 1938 when he died in the Tate House of cancer. I think he was 78 years old. And some of the owners since Colonel Sam's passing, right now it's owned by Polycor. Now the Tate families, they still own the mineral rights. So I think they charge by the cubic foot of marble that is extracted out of the ground at there and at Emrys Calcium Products and all that. The Tate family gets a royalty. And I think they sign a 20 or 25 year lease every 20 to 25 years. Just some famous projects that have contained Georgia marble. My mother-in-law, who's 89, back in the 50s, she worked as a secretary at Georgia Marble. When Hank Williams Sr. died, they sent his boot to Georgia Marble for the sculptors to put on his monument. And my mother-in-law got to hold Hank Williams Sr.'s boot, so.
Bill, read some of those.
Okay, so, all right, so, yeah, the New York Stock Exchange, some of that contains Georgia marble. The most famous is the Lincoln Memorial. All the Lincoln Memorial is Georgia marble. And it was mined at the White Quarry in Marble Hill and turned most of that was probably turned and finished at Nelson, I would imagine. The Supreme Court building, Wesleyan College, Emory University, St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, the U.S. Capitol, the columns. That was at the time of in the 1958, I believe it was when they replaced the columns on the Capitol. That was the largest project Georgia Marble had ever done at the time. It was over $5 million. They wanted it done before Kennedy's inauguration in '61. Obviously, the Tate School, the Tate Mansion, Pickens County Courthouse and Cherokee County Courthouse, Oglethorpe Monument there on town, Hank Williams' grave, Arlington National Cemetery. Over 90% of the headstones and monuments in Arlington come from Georgia marble. There's projects in every state in the Union, and there's projects all over the world. Anybody want to take a guess at this question here? 5 pounds. You add 2 zeros of that, you're probably pretty close. Yeah, we come in contact probably over 500 pounds a day of Georgia marble because it's in calcium carbonate. It's in these ceiling tiles, drywall, paint, toothpaste, the white powder in your chewing gum wrappers. Your car contains hundreds of pounds of Georgia marble from the tires, rubber in the tires, vinyl, paint, the headlights. We come in contact with it all the time. You don't even know it. Calcium Products started out in 1947. It's now operated by Emrys, which is a French-owned company. Began the main driver back then was chicken feed industry. It was animal feed and chicken feed. The calcium, because chickens don't have a stomach, they have a gizzard. The calcium carbonate helps the gizzard break down the food. And like I said, it's almost in everything we come in contact with. It's been about 8 or 10 years ago now. My wife and I won a silent auction, and we became miners for a day. So we went down in the mines at Emrys got there about 6:30 and left about 2 o'clock. So we spent a day underground, about 7 hours, 8 hours. It's pretty interesting. So they bring a scalper in, and they use that scalper to drag the walls and the ceilings to remove any loose debris that blasting didn't uncover or break apart. Then they use the loaders to load up the big trucks. What's amazing is that most of the roads down there is big enough. You know, y'all have been to on the marble quarry tour. A lot of y'all have. You remember those big dump trucks, uke trucks they got at Calcium Products? 2 of those can pass each other just like a roadway. So those roads are wider than this room, and they're about 35 feet high.
Hey, Bill, roughly how many miles of roads inside that mountain?
Good question. I don't know how many miles, but the entrance of the New York mine is at 1,300 feet elevation. We went down to the very end, or to the bottom, to 300 feet elevation above sea level, and we went a mile east towards J.M. Huber. So we drove several miles that day. I don't know how many, but I do know that's how we went over 1,000 feet down, and you're going in a circular pattern like a spiral staircase. This is the drilling and blasting crew. They drill holes in the walls of the marble, or I guess of the wall there, and they fill up the holes with. It's a granular product of it's what Timothy McVeigh used, similar to what he used in the Oklahoma City bombing back 30 years ago. It's ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel, and I forgot what the other compound is. And they blow that granular material in these holes, and then they wire it up with the blasting caps, and they do that at the end of the day. And when they leave, they detonate the charge, and they allow the dust and everything to settle, and they come back in the next morning around 6 o'clock and start taking out that marble. The amazing thing is, going back to your question, how many miles there are, since 1947, they blast every day, but they only blast about 13 feet in depth, 13 to 15 feet in depth each day. So that tells you how much blasting they've done since 1947. So. Yeah, they have some ventilation fans in there that keeps the air circulating. Yeah, they sure do. And they got different ventilation shafts as well. And like I said, we went to 300 feet above sea level. And when they first started Calcium Products, that was before OSHA and insurance, health regulations and all that. The ceilings were 70 feet. And OSHA years ago made them go to maximum of 30 feet. Anybody want to guess why? And actually, it makes sense. At 70 feet, you can't visually see with the naked eye the cracks forming but you can see them at 30 feet. So when those cracks form, they bring that scalper back in there and scrape and drag to remove that loose material so that there's no fatalities or injuries. And that right there is the entrance of the old mine. You see the difference there, 70-foot ceiling. They use that as an emergency escape route, as also a ventilation shaft as well. I'm sorry?
Have they ever had any big accidents or cave-ins or things like that?
If it has, it's been years ago. I'm sure they had back in the early days. The last fatality I'm aware of that happened in the marble industry was probably 15 years ago or so. It happened at Tate and at the finishing mill. They had several panels, marble panels stacked up, and one of the workers, for whatever reason, I guess he decided to take a shortcut, walk between two wall panels as opposed to walking around, and one collapsed and it crushed him. So that's been several years ago. Thank goodness that's the only fatality I remember hearing in years and years and years. And we finished our day at the old bagging plant, which is visible there back behind where the sheriff has the Jeep Fest. That was kind of interesting to see that old bagging plant. There are still bags of calcium carbonate sitting there. That I think that bagging plant was shut down in the early 80s. Any questions? Yes, sir.
How many people are employed?
At the height, Colonel Sam Tate, back in the early 20s, there was over 1,100 men and women employed in the marble industry. Now, there's between Huber, Emrys, and Tate, there's probably, I'd say there's less than 300. Technology is, they're extracting more marble today, greater quantities of marble with a lot less manpower, because back then it was very labor intensive back in the early 1900s. But technology is that, and the fact is people don't want to work for a living anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Are there color differences in different areas?
Is there what?
Color differences.
Color? Yes. There's several different colors depending on where they're at. You've got a couple different shades of gray, some darker and lighter, and you've got the white, and then you got the Etowah pink. And then there used to be down at Canton if you're crossing 575 or going down 575, you've seen that down below Holly Springs and Marble Quarry Road, that sign, that bridge. That on that road back years ago was where the green quarry was, so there was a green marble as well. Yes, ma'am.
Now, I understand that, is there not any pink marble left?
No, there's plenty of pink marble left. They're just not quarrying it right now. There's no demand for it. Yes, ma'am. You can call the Chamber of Commerce and find that they'll give you all the date, times, and they start at 10 o'clock and they run every 30 minutes except for from 12 to 1 there's none for lunch, and then the last one's at 2:30. At the where at Lee Newton Park, where the Chamber of Commerce is, that'll be the fairground, the carnival or the fairgrounds right there.
Got to ride a school bus.
Got to ride a school bus. But at least school buses are air conditioned. Back when we were kids, the only air conditioning you had was lower the window down. Yes, sir. It was an honorary term title. It wasn't military. Yeah. Public, yeah. Well, that, and also Tate Day, which is the first Saturday in November. You can go into they take you to Polycore, which is to me is the most interesting. I mean, Emrys and Huber's interesting, but to me, Polycore is the most interesting because I'm a little bit biased. My grandfather, he retired as the foreman at Tate in 1976, and I remember when I was a little kid back then, of course, insurance from OSHA wasn't that tough, or probably didn't even exist. And, he'd take me down there and I'd ride in the front end loaders and the dump trucks and ride on the train switch cars and all that. So back then you could just drive in there and it wasn't a big deal. So
there was one thing I wanted to add about the question. They take exact measurements of where they're getting the marble from. So when Tate Elementary put on an addition to the school, and remember that's pink marble, they could go back and whenever they built Tate in the 1800s.
1926 when they built
1926, they could find exactly where they had mined it, and the pink marble matched up perfectly.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, they built a new addition, the cafeteria. So they knew where that marble was, because when you see, if you go on the quarry tour and you go into the Tate quarry, you'll see these big blocks that are, gosh, 10, 12 feet long by 5 feet, 6 feet high, and probably 5 feet deep. They weigh 30, 40 tons piece. And there's spray paint on there, these numbers, and it's like the Dewey Decimal System in the library. They know where that vein of marble is, so if they ever have to go back and match an existing building. Yes, ma'am.
With new construction here in Big Tree, there's a lot of eruption of different rocks, and some of what you described is it marble.
No, there might be a few traces of marble deep down somewhere, but no, it's not marble. It's probably quartz, limestone, or granite, because we're near Pickens County is in that. If you look at a geological map, we're in that transition area from, west of here, like Adairsville is limestone. The more east you go from here, it's granite. And we're in that transition area where it's transitioning from lime, and I'm not a geologist, but limestone, marble, quartz, granite. So it could be some sandstone or something like that as well, depending on where it's at. Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that Colonel Tate wanted to be buried in his home?
I haven't heard that. He's buried in the Tate family cemetery. I'm sure that no, he probably want to be buried where he's at, because that's where his mother and father and all his his grandfather and all that are buried there at the Tate family cemetery. Right there.
Across from the railroad.
Yep, right there, exactly. Right there next to the train depot. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I related to the barn, the Tate barn that's across the street.
That's owned by the Tate estate, his heirs, and they just tore it down for whatever reason. I wish they hadn't have done it, but I can understand why they did. I'm sure the DOT didn't like it because it was an obstructed view there, and they hadn't took care of that barn, and it was deteriorating. And that was Colonel Sam's. Well, that's where they housed the company mules back in the day. That's where Miss Flory, Colonel Sam's sister, that's how she earned her spending money, her pocket money. She leased the mules to the company back then. That's where the mules were housed. Yes, sir.
Back in the mid-'70s when I got here, I used to root around that Tate estate, and I pulled in the back, and there was a garage door off the hinges, and I saw a Rolls Royce in the garage. So I went in the house, the door was wide open, and I met Sam Tate's great-granddaughter, and she had some guy there.
It was probably his great niece or something like that, because he legally didn't have any kids that he claimed. So.
She was living in the house.
Depending on when it was in the 70s. Oh, yeah. Well, see, vandals had gone in the Tate house and had destroyed it. I mean, they took anything of any possession. A moonshiner, I'm not going to mention his name because some of his family's still living here in the area, had a still in the attic of the Tate house.
Places on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a shirt that was from one of the kids that was pure silk, handmade. It was so intense and beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Pearl buttons on it and everything. And I wore that for a long time, but I felt real special. I got it from Lorraine.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, yeah. Lorraine was my great aunt, so she married into she was married to an heir of the Tate to, well, his name was Tate Hinton. So,
Okay, we're good.
yes.
I want to give you a wonderful, I'm not giving you the check. $400 check for this, but this is a souvenir big tree.
Well, thank you very much.
I'd rather have this than a $400 check. You know, so.
Bill's going to be hanging around here for questions and to give you autographs on his book. Thank you. Give him one more hand.